Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are ready to get going here. So just a quick couple notes here before we move to the panel, which is very exciting. I'm happy that we have this great panel here assembled and appreciate everyone's time. Last night, of course, there was a drawing, or there was at the reception a drawing for a GoPro. You had tickets in your badges. Hopefully you did put your other ticket into the bowl, which was in the TrueImage Interactive booth. They're going to actually pick the winner of that at the end of this section, so about 12:30 today. So you got to stick around, and stay in the room. So that'll be happening there. But yeah, we have a great panel here and great sessions coming up. So I want to introduce a longtime friend and our colleague Greg Sterling from a local search association to moderate the panel.
All right. Where's the applause? Come on. All right. Who's looking at email right now? Okay. All right. Well, we have an opinionated group here, and this is hopefully going to be a very interesting discussion. Who's your Metabot is the name of the session, right? Who's your Metabot? Okay, so so I'm Greg Sterling. I worked for quite a few years with Dan and Pete and Derek and others at Opus Research, and now I'm with the Local Search Association, which, if you don't know what the Local Search Association is, it's the successor to the Yellow Pages Association, now focused on digital media and location-based marketing. And that's enough about me. I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves and then maybe give us their interpretation of the word Metabot. Andy.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Andy Peart. I look after the marketing for a company called Artificial Solutions. Like many of you in this room, we specialize in a form of natural language technology. We refer to it as natural language interaction. It's a form of AI that allows people to talk to devices, applications, websites in a human-like conversational manner. As a company, the technology hails out of the Nordics, which is quite a hotbed of disruptive technology. In fact, our chairman is a guy that was instrumental in MySQL and Spotify as well. We've got offices across Europe. The last 3 years, we've been growing in the US. We've got an office just up the road in Mountain View, albeit just up the road. As I drove in this morning, it didn't seem like just up the road.
Like it took 2.5 hours, right?
Just to give you a flavour of some of the customers, they range from the likes of Vodafone, Telenor, DHL, Shell, large enterprise organisations with whom we're working, plus a good number of consumer electronics manufacturers, both US and Asian. And for myself, I've been in marketing for 25 years, and as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK.
Hi, I'm Lauren Kunze from Pandorabots, which is the oldest and largest chatbot hosting platform in the world. We provide a free sandbox where anyone can build a bot, and most of our customers are DIY. Over 235,000 developers have signed up for the platform since inception. They've built more than 300,000 chatbots, which have chatted with end users over 3 billion times, so we have a lot of data, and we use that to build open source frameworks for building bots, which makes it faster. And we also provide professional services to help larger enterprises build chatbot applications. Oh, and Metabot. For me, Metabot is the solution to having one operator bot that helps cut through all the noise with all the different domain-specific bots that are out there, and Alexa is one example.
Do people often ask you about Pandora? I love when they hear you work at Pandora, they say, I love Pandora. I have your app on my phone.
Yeah, well, that's actually an even funnier story. So we got started in 2002, the platform, but we incorporated in 2008. And two guys came up and said, hey, we're starting a technology company and we want to use the name, but we want to make sure that there's no conflict. And the founder at the time said, well, what does your company do? And they said, we want to put radio on the internet. And he said, ha, radio, good luck. So gave away the name, and now we actually recently moved to Oakland, and we're 2 blocks away from Pandora Radio. So we pass under the sign of their offices every day.
A lot of your visitors show up at the wrong office, I would imagine.
Yes, it happens.
So, Dave.
That's great. Good morning. My name's Dave. I work at Amazon on the Alexa team. And does anybody here have an Amazon Echo? So show of hands or Fire TV? Okay. It's very interesting. 2 years ago, for me to say what an Amazon Echo was, people were like, it's a speaker and it talks, right? It was very hard for folks to understand. And I used to use the concept of ambient computing. Does everybody remember the Star Trek computer, just the ability to reach out and talk, right? And I realized just the other day, I walked in my office, I said, Alexa, put on the lights to 20%, and I started playing music, right? So I am now Picard walking into the room. We are living in science fiction. And a lot of that happens through the magic of what all you know, the holy grail of natural language understanding. And really, Alexa and Echo, to really define it for you, there are two things that Amazon offers. We offer an open, free voice platform. So this means anybody can incorporate it, anybody can code for it, and you don't have to know anything about NLU. In fact, we were talking before about a lot of chatbots have integrated with Alexa, and you may have seen that earlier this morning in the other talk. That has two SDKs. The one allows you to put Alexa into things, and she's been put into cars, radios, smartphones, mobile apps, you name it. The other is what we call skills. So you can make Alexa learn something. You teach her a new skill. So it's a voice-driven experience. And then we also happen to make a product that has Alexa in it, and that is what Amazon Echo is. And we now offer the Echo in a couple of different form factors based on what customers have asked for. So there's the main Amazon Echo speaker. There's a little dot which you can put anywhere, and it can connect to your own speaker systems. And then there's a tap, which is a portable Echo, so you can have it out. I have it out in my pool in the summertime for my kids, so when they come up and they knock it over, it doesn't explode all over the place, which I actually did have that happen about a year ago. And anybody who has an Echo, when that thing exploded, it was like a pet died. I had my kids coming into the kitchen and saying, Alexa, what's the weather? And there was silence, right? And you realize as a human being, you start to have that personal connection. And that's what's been super interesting for me, is to see the reviews on Amazon too. A third of them have the word love in it. And I've been in this industry 20 years. I used to work at Microsoft. I've never been on a product where I've kind of seen that customer connection. And I think you've probably all seen that too, is that NLU allows you to do that. When you start having a conversation as a human being versus a keyboard. Metabot too, for me, I think Metabot's going to be different for everyone. For some people, it may be Alexa. And I want, when we first started with this, it was very interesting. It's been a privacy journey, and the earlier discussion had this too, where the things that Alexa does today, customers wouldn't have allowed us to do that a year ago. They got used to playing music and questions, and then we heard, hey, I want you to read my Kindle books. I want to hear audiobooks. I want to get my own news flash briefing. Hey, can I order an Uber, a Domino's pizza, and get my Fitbit steps, right? All of that has happened because of that trust level. And I think Metabots, depending on which one you use all the time, will become that main assistant that does things for you in your life and talks to other, it's C-3PO, right? It's human-cyborg relations. You go talk to my TV and my toaster. I just want you to handle that for me. But I think there'll be many of those Metabots, with Alexa being one.
Right, I agree. I actually think everyone will need to have a different Metabot that's personalized to them, whether or not that's one technology solution that's personalized or a lot of different solutions.
Yeah, I'd concur with what Dave and Lauren have said about the definition of a Metabot. As far as adding an attribute to it, I would say that it needs to be highly conversational, and by that I'm meaning human-like and intelligent and able to interact in a two-way conversation, not just take one question, give one answer, and that's it. It needs to be able to interact with you.
Yeah, that's definitely true. The most popular bot on our platform, which has between a few 100,000 and 1 million interactions a day right now across a number of different channels, is an entertainment-oriented personality bot that's just designed to chat with you in natural language and doesn't actually do very much that's useful. I mean, it can tell you the weather, but it can tell you jokes, but it's more about companionship.
Yeah, because with our platform, we've built a showcase that we called Indigo, which is a mobile personal assistant, and we've built all this functionality into it. And when you analyse the actual conversations, it's interesting to see that people are still asking it for jokes and
right, exactly. And to your point, 10% of people have told the bot that I was just talking about, I love you. And we see a ton of people trying to initiate romantic relationships with the bots on our platforms as well. So yeah, some of those 3 billion logs are not safe for work.
So there are a couple of things that occurred to me. One is about consumer behavior, consumer expectations. This is something we talked about earlier. Chatbots, voice assistants, virtual assistants are starting to change the way that consumers interact with information and expect to interact with information. And so this is a question you can answer too, Dave, even as you're representing consumer devices. What do you think the sort of medium-term impact of the rise of bots, chatbots, and the rise of artificial intelligence and better voice recognition is going to be? I mean, in terms of the larger enterprise and brand kind of platform.
Yeah. Well, look, there's no doubt that consumer expectations are changing. People now want to be able to speak to devices and to be able to get a meaningful response from them. And it's also pretty clear that technology that started life in the consumer arena will gradually make its way into the enterprise. And I am totally convinced that by 2020, natural language technology will be as important to enterprises as internet technology is today. And I know that that's quite a bold statement, but if you go back 25 years and you talk to a CTO back then and said, what about the internet? They probably wouldn't know what you're talking about, let alone recognize that within 5 years it was going to become a fundamental technology to them. And I think we're at that stage in the evolution of natural language that very soon it's going to become fundamental. And enterprises need to sit up and take note and to really start to get on the bandwagon. Because one of the things that the big tech giants are doing very well at the moment is implementing these conversational systems and then gathering the data from it. And they're learning an awful lot about the consumer on the back of that. And I suspect it's a goal of theirs to become the default interface between the consumer and technology, and the rest of enterprises out there become the secondary suppliers. So what can enterprises do about it? Well, they can get on the bandwagon themselves. They can start to build natural language capabilities, and they can start to gather that conversational data that gives them this amazing amount of insight. It's like having a focus group, but not of 20 people, a focus group of 1 million people, 24/7, 365. It's massively valuable. So, without doubt, I believe that enterprises need to start to get involved. And I'll stop because I could keep talking all the time. And I have to
Go ahead, Lauren. You want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the same thing. There's been a huge uptick in inbound interest from large brands who are definitely thinking beyond dipping their toe in at this point.
And what does that mean specifically when you say you're seeing a huge uptick? What are they doing?
In unsolicited inbound interest in building bots.
So hi, we want to build a bot, but...
Yeah, exactly. And hi, we want to build a bot. We have a team assembled. These are the 10 people on the team. We have, our chief marketing officer, head of brand voice. We have developers. We have, people who are going to help integrate with our back-end systems, open up APIs to our platforms. We have a budget for a 3 to 6 month pilot, and we also want to talk about our 5-year strategy. So we're definitely seeing, people who have come and thought through, and a lot more education about the limitations of the technology and realistic expectations about what they can do today and what they should be planning for 5 years from now.
And where are those bots going to be deployed, to the extent that you know?
So actually what we're seeing right now in terms of the very short term, I agree with both of you that voice will be dominant to a large extent in the future because it is the most natural interface. But in the short term, because text messaging is so popular and it's also a narrower problem when you get rid of avatars and voice issues, which aren't totally perfect but are certainly also getting there. So a lot of the brands and a lot of the recent interest is from wanting to deploy on now open messaging channels. Facebook, Slack, Skype, Kik, Twitter, Line, Google's opening up. I think iMessage just released the App Store today. So that's where I think a lot of the immediate uptick is coming from. But these people also realize, and brands realize, that they can also deploy the same bot on those channels to their websites and to their native apps and to SMS. So essentially, you build once and you can put the bot in any messaging-based environment. There is a problem with that statement, which is that there are no standards across these platforms.
Well, this
so
is what I was going to ask you, is can you build one bot and deploy it in many places, or are there technical obstacles there?
So you can, in terms of the underlying text component, but each different platform treats certain things like rich media in a different way. So what that means is the way that Facebook handles images and emoji is not the same way that Skype handles it. In fact, they all have their different sets of emoji, and you have to, create libraries and integrations for each platform. But the deployment side is a much easier problem. It's just about development resources, additional libraries, slight differences in code. The real problem is the conversational design component and designing the right text interaction.
Just jumping in, Lauren, I would argue, I agree with what you're saying, but I would argue that bots are just one of a range of channels that are equally important. One of the things we talked about on our briefing call was, what's the difference between a bot and a virtual assistant, whether they're the same or not. I would actually kind of say, well, they're both forms of conversational systems. So, certainly for the purposes of today, you don't need to differentiate. And to your question, Greg, can you build once and deploy many? Well, yes, I would say that's a fundamental requirement for enterprises, not to have to go off and build separate conversational systems for all the different channels. It's just a hiding to nothing. You need to be able to look for technologies that allow you to build once and then deploy across multiple channels, taking on board the differences of those channels, the fact that maybe on a mobile device you have smaller real estate versus, say, a website where you could play a video more easily, so taking into account those sorts of things, and deploying multiple languages as well, because outside of the UK, outside of the US, people do talk in multiple languages.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're in a sea change right now. It's funny, I remember having a Commodore Amiga in like 1987, and it came with this text-to-speech in the command line and being blown away that my computer was talking as a human being. And so this technology, the idea of natural language, has been around for a really long time, but it hasn't been until recently with cloud computing and just machine learning and AI and everything that's going on, where I feel like we've reached that tipping point where people say, okay, it's good enough. Now, there is a ton of work that still has to be done. There are hard problems. At Amazon, we were working for years on this. There was, pieces we had to invent that didn't exist. And what's great, what really has me excited, is I hear from brands and I hear from customers, and they come to me and they say, I want to do something with Alexa. And they say, well, what do you want to do? And they go, I don't know. I want to do something. Right? They've used the Echo. And it reminds me of, in the early .com days, I would, one of my early projects was with a huge e-commerce site. I won't name it. It wasn't Amazon. But it was building an actual ordering system where nobody had really done e-commerce back then. And we would get pressure saying, well, we mail out all these catalogs. We have a phone number. We have people. We have sales staff that talk to it. And I would say, no, this is the web. This is a browser. It's just another interface. Your back-end systems stay the same. And when I talk to customers, that's how I explain Alexa, is that voice is another interface. You don't need to throw out mobile. You don't need to throw out web. You can have Alexa as a way for somebody who's already one of your customers to link their customer account to you, and then they can use an Alexa-enabled device, that could be an Echo, that could be an app on their phone, to actually interface with your service. And so that makes things better for brands and enterprises, which notoriously have very bad UI. Voice becomes a UI, in my opinion, where it can take the most complex problem and it can make it very simple. Now, that being said, it also flips utility on its head, in that browsing for information is horrible with voice. It's very simple with a mobile or a web-based system where I have tabs and I have the ability to have information on screen. And in fact, when I do design sessions with companies, that's the biggest hurdle is the developers want to take, okay, I have all these things and I need all these inputs, and then they make Alexa ask all those questions, right? And that's not how we speak as human beings. The panel that was here this morning, I thought it was really good when they talked about context, right? Alexa today, she has no context. She's basing the context on this interaction model that the developers created. And if it's not in that interaction model, she doesn't know about it, right? And as human beings, when we have a discussion, I know we're here in San Francisco, I know what the weather's like, I know what the day, it's implied as a human being. And machines really need to learn that. And the talk, the communication that happens on the back end when Alexa talks, because it's an open platform, it's just sending JSON securely back and forth across the web. So that means any API that you have today that you're using in your mobile app, that you're using on the web, she can access and communicate. But it's not AI talking to AI, right? It's simply web requests going back and forth and being parsed, and then language coming back. So it's important to think about that today. We're at that crawl, walk, and run phase, and I'm starting to see conversations where people are actually thinking about that run phase, and that's what I would tell an enterprise is think about run. Today we're going to crawl. So today you're going to have somebody talk. Alexa will tell you what she thinks they want, and then everything else is what you've already been doing today. You're just connecting mobile APIs.
So context for something like Alexa or an Echo, which sits in my kitchen or in the bedroom or in the living room, is going to be the history, right? It's going to be getting to know me more and more and more through the history of inquiries and transactions that I do so that I can do expedited things with it, and every interaction isn't isolated. But right now, there's no data sharing, right? If I do an inquiry via the kayak skill, there isn't some sharing of that with other apps or with Alexa generally.
Not that companies and developers aren't asking for it every single day. Somebody here was talking about they were in my office hours that I do weekly. I mean, that comes up all the time. Developers want access to that. They want access to the device type, device location. Voice, because it's so new, we take privacy very, very seriously. So we do not expose any Amazon customer information to third parties. We do record everything that is said so that Alexa can learn how to communicate with that human being. And that's how the computer science of a language model and a lexicon and all of that get built over time. So in fact, if you have multiple Amazon Echoes in the house, the Amazon Echo in my kitchen responds way better to my wife than me. It's almost like we have an estranged relationship. The Echo in the basement in my office talks to me like that, and it's because my wife, that's primarily where she communicates with it. So the language model is actually a little bit different, even though it's Alexa. And then what we do for privacy is a customer can go back, they can see everything that's said, they can delete any single one of those, or they can delete all of it. So we put that into their hands when it comes to privacy.
Just real quickly, how many skills are there currently?
There's over 2,500. There may actually be over 3,000 by now. So the developer response has been amazing. Everything from, if you have an Echo, try open a box of cats and it will meow. So if you have a cat or a dog in the house, that is really funny to see that response. To the Wayne Investigations, which is a game from Warner Brothers where you can actually solve Bruce Wayne's parents, and it's like the radio shows of old. You hear a narrator, you hear sound effects. To Fitbit, asking how many steps I've had today, or ordering a car from Uber.
So how many transactional apps where you can actually do something that is, like ordering a pizza or ordering a car? How many of those?
I don't have any numbers around that. We do have categories and a search-based system where you can look for that. We call that technology. So we call that account linking. And the technology behind that is OAuth 2, so if you've done any web or mobile logging. So you have the ability through OAuth 2 to set up a token so that a customer now is your customer when they're talking with Alexa. And we don't take any cut if a transaction happens. So for example, if you order a Domino's pizza, that's your transaction between you and Domino's. We have nothing to do with that. We're simply allowing Alexa to go ahead and tell Domino's what type of order that you'd like.
So one of the issues that was raised, I see, Lauren, you want to say something. Did you want to say something? Go ahead and respond.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, That's a good policy in terms of enterprises who want to get on your platform. We definitely see a lot of fear over, well, what if we already invested a ton of resources in building out our website and building out our mobile apps, which, by the way, nobody downloads. And now we don't want to spend a bunch to build a Facebook bot, an Alexa skill, and hand over the keys of our customer relationship management to these giant companies who don't have a stated business model. Well, you guys do, but
or
not
who
does.
don't necessarily
Yeah.
have an interest in promoting the company in its best light.
Right, who may turn around and charge you later, or it's just an unknown right now.
Or even protecting the brand of your company.
Right.
A virtual assistant, a bot for British Airways versus a Virgin Atlantic would have a very different persona. They're very different companies, and yet they both fly people across the Atlantic. Companies have invested billions of dollars in building their.
Let me inject something there because it's an interesting question. So we had this problem from a brand perspective, with Google sort of becoming the quote front door to the internet until mobile came along, and many people complained that sort of flattened brands. So all the brand equity and the value that brands had built up was sort of essentially flattened and made equivalent by the sort of presentation of search results and the ranking of search results. There was no differentiation there. And is that the situation you're describing now, that KLM and Virgin Atlantic and British Airways are going to essentially have those brand features flattened or masked through these third-party bot UIs?
I believe that is a problem. There are two schools of thought, within our client base. Some, and I encourage this, very much take the persona approach, and they build personality into their assistants, whether they're bots or virtual assistants or mobile personal assistants, whatever you want to call them, but they have strong personality. And Indigo is an example of that, Siri would be another example, and so on. The other approach is almost to dehumanize them and make them very factual in terms of their approach. Again, some of our clients wish to do that, and that's fine. It's not the way I personally would encourage them.
Yeah, it's conversational software, so you have to build something that people actually enjoy talking to, even if it is useful.
So the conventional sort of technology advice, the Silicon Valley advice would be, you have to jump into this, you have to start testing, you have to get going on this, because you don't want to delay and let your competitors get out in front of you and establish early wins, and then you're behind the curve. To what extent do you agree with that advice, or would you say, maybe Andy, wait for a little bit, see where the consumer adoption is, learn from others' mistakes, and then move forward? What would be, all three of you, what's your advice there to those trying to get involved?
Well, I would say absolutely do not delay. You cannot afford to delay, because if you do, you stand the risk of being taken out by more nimble competitors. I believe that enterprises have got to start to play the game. There are different ways that they can get involved. It might be with a web-based virtual assistant for customer service, as we were talking about earlier at this conference. It might be through a mobile personal assistant that provides differentiation. For example, Unibet is an interesting example, an online betting company that is actually Europe's second largest online betting company, is working with us. And what they have built is a mobile personal assistant that addresses people like myself, to be honest, who's never really placed a bet in his life. But I can imagine that I might want to say, place a tenner on England to win the World Cup. Well, I live in hope. And I want it to understand me and then take me through that process. And it fits in with their whole positioning, which is one of innovation, and it's getting them a foothold in this whole area. I would absolutely encourage enterprises to do that.
Yes, you can't build a conversational experience in a vacuum. No matter what you think people will say, they will always say something different in production. And we see customers across the board, some of whom have no data to help them expect what people will say in a conversation, and some who have a lot of data from many different channels, from call centers, from live chat, from emails. So the more data that you have, the faster the process to build a bot will be. and you can't actually collect that data from real people until you put something out there. In terms of the enterprises that we're seeing today, I think the question is not should we get started, but they have so many ideas, it's which one is the right path, because we're seeing that bots can provide value at many different layers of the organization. There's customer care, there's brand engagement, there's surveys for which the completion rates are insanely high with a bot right now, if done conversationally.
With a voice UI or with a text UI?
With a text UI.
So let me...
But the same is true for voice.
We have some time for questions, so if people have questions, please identify yourselves to Derek. But let me ask you just real quickly, well, let's save this for the end, because it's a good concluding question. Go ahead.
I just want 30 seconds. My opinion on this is that we're in a unique time in history where we've already gone through the web revolution. And it's interesting for people who look at voice and, is it going to be like web search? We've gone through a mobile revolution now, and what I remind people of is that, one, it's super early days. Do not bet on voice as the primary interface for you attracting new customers. Keep doing what you're doing. Give them a way to interact with you in a new voice-enabled experience. And in fact, that's where we've seen brands with success. Twitter just announced, they have Alexa support the other day, and the way they did it is they did a tweet with a picture of saying Alexa and how you can enable it. One of the things we do for customers is you can just say, Alexa, enable Twitter, or Alexa, enable Uber. So you can now be a brand, and just like you see little app logos, you could just say, Alexa, enable, and the name of your skill, and it gives somebody who's already communicating with you just an easy way to do that through voice. So I would look at it as another interface strategy, not as a customer growth strategy today. It's just far too early for that. But you should absolutely be thinking about what does voice mean over the next couple of years for you and your business.
Okay. Just a quick observation. It's interesting, Dave, you're talking a lot about voice. Lauren, you're talking a lot about text. We very much treat it as natural language, whereas voice, text, touch, and even gesture all rolls together to form the natural language solution. Yep. And we like to make solutions multimodal wherever possible so that people can flip between the different modes. Okay, question over here and then here. Yep.
So you talked about, this is for Amazon. Dave, you talked about OAuth. Mm-hmm. Thinking about the presentation from TalkTalk on voice biometrics, maybe I'm missing something here, but is there a path for Amazon to provide sort of single sign-on using voice biometrics to sort of make less friction and doing these kinds of third-party?
Yeah, we get asked that all the time. Developers are definitely asking. Today, for privacy reasons, Alexa cannot distinguish between human voices. In fact, when the Alec Baldwin commercials ran during the Super Bowl, there were a lot of people's echoes who went off and answered to when he was talking. And you may have seen that before. I run a podcast, and I tell people, if you're going to listen to my podcast on your Echo, make sure you've muted her. So I can't speak to any roadmaps or any plans, but I can say we've consistently, and this is a good sign, for customers and people to ask us a year ago, can you distinguish that that's actually me? Right? It's one thing to know now that there's a device in your home that was actually got a request at 10:30 at night. It's another thing to know it was at 10:30 at night by you, right? And that's a much bigger privacy concern. So today, that technology does not exist in Alexa, but we are aware of the requests by both customers and developers.
Yeah, I want to comment. Tobias Bill with Aspect.
It's not on.
There we go. All right. Tobias Goebel with Aspect. I want to comment on this brand recognition topic that we discussed maybe 5 minutes ago. If we go back 20 years or so, there was voice, right, as a channel over telephony, and brands didn't really care much about brand recognition. There wasn't much you could do on the voice channel. Maybe play a jingle, and that's it. That when the web came about, now we had a whole screen to fill. and it was much more immersive, right? And once you wanted people on your page, because when they were on your page, they would constantly be looking at your brand and engaging and all of that. Mobile came about, same thing, pretty much, right? Now we're going back to where we came from, conversational, and maybe we should not talk about a bot strategy, but a conversational commerce strategy, because you don't want to, it's about voice or text, doesn't matter, as you said. It's conversational that we're going back to. So I think we'll get pushback from some folks in the enterprise when we say, well, we advise you to put your conversations on Messenger, because now they lose control, right? Who owns the conversation at that point?
Facebook owns
Facebook owns the conversation, and you're on
service.
Facebook when you're interacting with that brand, right? Maybe similar with Amazon, not quite with the Echo. But what can our answer be as vendors? We'll have to say, look, either you do it or someone else will. So you could fight it, right? But somebody else will do it, and consumers will love it, and then what? So there's no question here, just a comment, but if you want to
No,
reply.
well, so let's not comment. Thank you for your comment. Let's not respond to it, because we've got a bunch of other questions, and we've got about 3 minutes left. So I don't know what yes. Okay, go ahead.
Hi.
I mean, you can comment on it at the end if you want.
Will Sadkin from Parlance Corporation. There's been several panels that have talked about Metabots in terms of having shared conversational context, and that's really sort of required if you're the primary interface that people are using to get to all these different services. Is there any work, could you share anything with respect to where the industry is going as far as standards of dealing with that information exchange to make it easier, to make it more rapid development of that kind of cross-domain information gathering?
So quick responses, if you can.
There is some standardization effort going on, notably between Microsoft, Kik, and Slack, but I don't think you will see standards emerge between Facebook, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, etc., or Amazon, because everybody sees this as a second chance if you missed out on having the mobile app store. So I think everyone will have a different platform for a while, and the burden will be on developers, and these platforms are iterating rapidly, so it's too early for standards, but it would be nice.
Yeah, the great thing about standards is there's so many, right? Our approach when we created Alexa was that it needed to be open. So that means somebody today could make a competitor for an Echo with Alexa in it, and that's totally fine. That's what, for us, customers being able to access Alexa wherever they want and however they want is important. So I think from a standards base today, we're kind of piggybacking out on the web because people have created all of these APIs that you can communicate securely over SSL. And if you have a customer relationship with them, it can be personalized data. Domino's knows my easy order. They know my order history. I'm communicating with them. So it is personalized in that way. And we're getting out of the way of that relationship. We're letting that happen because we're allowing an open platform that they can communicate with their customer however they wish. We're just simply enabling that transaction as simple as possible by a customer using their voice.
Okay, we've got 1 more minute. I want this gentleman's question to be answered because he had his hand up first, and others
Nice to
will.
meet you, Greg. Thank you.
Others will accost the panelists later. Go ahead.
Thank you. So one of the questions seems to be obvious around Metabots is that right now Alexa or Echo is not really like a phone. If I put an app on a phone, then it's really my experience directly to the customer, whereas with Echo, it's through Alexa. And at the same time, we're moving towards conversational UIs, where it really is important that there is a personality we're talking to. Like Lauren was saying, it's fun to have this conversation. Do you see a future where Amazon would allow you to have conversations with other bots than Alexa on Echo?
Well, I can't speak to hypotheticals. But what I would say is what's unique about Alexa, and the reason why I had to explain it so much in the past, is when you're writing for the ear and not the eye. And that was very strange for people. There is no screen. And when you're talking about the difference between mobile and Alexa, that's really the difference is how do I ask for something from across the room and have an artificial intelligence respond to that and actually figure out what I wanted. So what happens is that voice is very good for direct requests. I know what I want before I ask for it. I want this piece of music, or I have this piece of question. And so in your scenario with another bot or another brand, my advice would be figure out what are the top 3 when you do analytics. What are your customers asking for every day in your mobile app? That top thing is what you should make in a skill. And you'll start to see engagement there. For me, it was actually the Nest in my house turning the thermostat on. I use that all the time. In fact, I fight with my kids over the temperature through it. But it
70,
becomes a
no,
specific
65,
scenario.
no, 70, no, 65.
Yeah, exactly. So specific scenarios, don't look at voice as a replacement for a mobile. Even in a chatbot scenario, there are chatbots that have integrated with Alexa, but it's very specific information. So it's the initial question that you want. And then you can continue on your mobile phone if you want. You can actually interact back and forth that way too, because you control the server-side experience.
You're basically saying commands, not conversation.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You're basically saying you're basically saying that Alexa can help you command to intent, but not having a conversation with your customer.
You could do both. We call that one and done. If I'm going to ask, like, Alexa, tell me a joke. Or you can have a full conversation back and forth to get the information that you need. Yeah, it's entirely up to you how you want to deliver that experience. We support both from the API-wise.
Okay, I regret that we weren't able to take more questions. You guys are going to be around a little bit later.
Yeah, I'll be around.
Okay, so Dave, you just provided some good advice. Lauren and Andy, why don't you provide some very succinct advice or final comments to the room before we
I'd just like to
adjourn?
pick up on the previous question, which was around this massively thorny issue about how do you get bots, virtual assistants, to talk to each other. And standards are definitely going to be coming. It's an issue that we've been looking at as well, where we've got patented technology that looks at using both implicit and explicit personalization to be able to direct a query through to the relevant response, the relevant assistant. And I think it's a fundamental issue to making sure our industry sort of gets to the next stage. I'd just like to leave it at that.
Final word, Lauren.
I think most everything has been said. I agree. I mean, we created our own open standard, which is the most widely used scripting language in the world. It's like Alexa. A lot of other big companies have built bots using that language. And I do think that is the future. And I guess I'll just echo what we already said. Don't wait. If you're a brand in the room today, start experimenting. There are a lot of open platforms that are free with languages you can learn and see what you can build.
Okay, so please join me in thanking the panelists. And we're